And then we started a series here a few weeks ago now called Entrusted. And this one is kind of all about looking at our life investment and trying to figure out how do we spend our lives and giving a little bit of thought to that, some intentionality around, we're all we have time and energy and resources and gifts and experiences. There's all kinds of stuff that we have in our lives and our experience. And we want to take some time and look at how do we spend that, or more importantly, how do we invest all of that? And how does God see that, right, is the big question. And one of the things we've been talking about over the last handful of weeks is we said, man, God is the one who made all things, right? He created everything, and he is the one who created us, and he looks at us and says, I want to put my resources, the things that I've made, and I want to entrust them to you. I want you to have kind of the joy and the privilege of managing those things and giving them away and interacting with some of what I hope to see happen in the world. And so we've been talking about that for a few weeks. And if this is your first time, and you can go back if you want to and catch up, or if you've missed a week over the last few weeks, you can catch up online. You can go to our YouTube channel and always kind of grab the messages there. Last weekend, we talked specifically about what do I do when I'm entrusted with a season that maybe I didn't pick, right? Like I'm in a place or I'm in a scenario that I wouldn't necessarily choose. How do I kind of own that and walk into that as an entrusted person? So that was last week. Today what we want to do is we want to have a little bit of a unique conversation around how does God view me as a person who is entrusted, right? What's his attitude toward me, and how does he view me as I'm living my life? Like what when God's kind of watching me do this, how would he see me in the middle of all that? And I know that some of us are here, and maybe you're like me and you have no church background at all. I remember thinking, I'm not even sure that there is a God. I would have called myself an atheist. And I thought, if there was a God, he's probably mad at me, right? And that was kind of my assumption about him. I know a bunch of us grew up in church, and we maybe saw God a little bit like an auditor of us, and he's always kind of looking for the thing that we did wrong. And if you walk closely with God, maybe you feel like you're under a microscope if you have a certain experience with church. And is that how God sees us? Is that how he feels about us? That's what we want to dive into, and here's what I think you're going to walk away with today. I think you're going to walk away, if you're investigating Jesus, I think you're going to walk away with a very different view of who God is. I think if you're a follower of Jesus today, you're going to walk away with fuel for motivation for life, right? That God didn't just send Jesus to save me from my sin, although that's certainly true, and then to one day hope for heaven to come. The entirety of my life is given purpose when I follow Jesus, that he wants to transform all of the minutes and the days of my life, not just the moment of salvation or the end. And so we want to talk about that and look at that, and what we can find is, I think, an empowerment and an encouragement, not walking away feeling scrutinized, but champion. So we're going to dive into it. And what we're going to look at in the Bible is a passage we've actually looked at here before at Grace. It's so important to this series, like I can't avoid it. So I'm like, we're just going to go back there and kind of look at it again. And I find personally, this passage is so motivating to me as I think about my life. And so I think it'll be helpful for all of us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through this passage, explain it a little bit. Stick with me. What we're going to do is hear a story that Jesus is telling. It's a parable of, right? So it's kind of like a story that compares and explains some things. And then as we unpack this parable and story a little bit together, we're going to walk away with some of those takeaways. So let's dive into it a little bit. If you want to follow along, you can do that in your Bibles if you have them. If you want a Bible, if you want to open one and look along, you can grab one from underneath the chairs there, or always go to YouVersion as well on your phone if you want. And here's where we're going to be in Matthew chapter 25, and we're going to start in verse 14. And so turn there if you want to, and here's where we're going to start. Jesus, again, is teaching this parable, and he's talking about the kingdom of God and what it's going to be like at the end of time. He says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them, right? So you got this rich guy, he's entrusting his wealth to his servants, and he says to one, he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey, right? So you kind of get the picture. You got a guy that he's going to call later. He's going to call him the master, and evidently he has some wealth. And he looks and he says, "Here's a guy with 5. Here's a guy with 2. Here's a guy with 1. This is my stuff, but I'm entrusting it to you," right? Here's kind of how the story unfolds. So, pick back up. Here's what it says. The man who received 5 bags of gold went at once, and he put his money to work, gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. It says, but the man who received 1 bag went off, and he dug a hole in the ground, and he hid his master's money. His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." He's going to look at these 2 and celebrate them, right? Then he comes to the man with 1 bag of gold, and this is how the guy talks to his master. He says, "Master, I knew that you're a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you've not scattered seed." He says, "So I was afraid, and I went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you," right? Kind of gives his bag of gold back. And then catch the master's reply. It's pretty fascinating. The master replies, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvested where I've not sown and gather where I've not scattered seed." He says, "Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest." All right, let's dive into this and unpack it just a little bit of what's going on. The story, of course, right, is kind of it's the story of this master entrusting his wealth to these 3 servants, and we're supposed to get the idea that this is very much like God entrusting things to us, right, entrusting his wealth to us. And then the idea is these 2 are going to look at what they have, what they've been entrusted with, and they're going to move towards, and they're going to stretch out in faith, and they're going to land in a place where they multiply what they've been given. This guy lands with 4, this guy lands with 10. And then we're going to see that this guy with 1 is a little bit kind of the cautionary tale. Don't do what this guy did, right? He takes his 1 and he digs a hole and he buries it in the ground, which I think at first glance, when I read this story, this is super surprising to me. And here's why. Because the reality is that these guys didn't take what they were given, they were entrusted with, and multiply it without taking some risks. The reality is that they would have had to do some stuff. They would have to put that money to work, and they would have probably had to expend a bunch of energy and potentially suffer loss of what they've been given. And certainly, right, the story doesn't unpack it totally, but it's kind of assumed that all 3 of these would have encountered some version of fear as they look to take what they have been entrusted with and do something with it. This last one, the guy who takes it and hides in the ground, he kind of runs into fear and says, "I don't want to live in this. I'm going to go and I'm going to bury this thing that the guy has given me because I'm scared that if I mess it up, he's going to be harsh with me." And I think that tone is, I think, probably the tone that many of us wonder if God would look at us and have. I don't know if I can go for it, so to say, when it comes to doing things for God and with God, because if I mess it up, maybe God's going to look at me and be frustrated. Maybe God's going to look at me and he's already frustrated because he knows all the worst things about me, and yet he continues to entrust his wealth, so to say, to me. And we're talking about wealth. We're not just talking about money. We're talking about time and our abilities and our gifts and our opportunities, our stories, the relationships that God has put in our lives, right? Kind of the totality, all the total impact of our whole life. God's looking at us and saying, "I have put this stuff in your lap. Oh, and by the way, we know this from the rest of kind of the context of the Bible that if we're worried about, right, if we're worried about sin and all of that has been taken care of course, through Jesus, that Jesus would come to the planet and live a perfect life and die an innocent death and rise from the dead. And then he looks at people and he says, hey, I want to forgive you. And then I want you to be entrusted and be free to take what you've been given and kind of run with it. Right? So not only is, if you're a follower of Jesus, is God not looking at you, scrutinizing your decisions. He's not looking at you and saying, see, you messed up, you're going to hell. I know you didn't go to church, right? You weren't a super Christian. You didn't come at 9 o'clock. You came at 10:45 where everybody else comes. By the way, we have another service just telling you. Right? He's not looking at you and saying, hey, this thing is, I know what you did. I'm going to condemn you. He's like, I paid for all of that here. All the moral stuff, all the stuff that you can be condemned for, it's all paid here. And the person who really understands this is deeply altered. Like if you and I actually get the fact that a totally innocent person, Jesus, would in essence take a bullet for us, take the payment for us. He would take the cross, right? And he would do all of that in order to pay a debt we could never pay, and then give us a life that we could never live and live it faithfully. This has all been taken care of. And now he looks at us and says, now you have a freedom to take your life and go after it. You can use your life and make it a thank you to me. Your life is not meant to try to be clung to. Everything that you have and have been entrusted with is going to go away. The time that we have is going to go away. Right? We aren't going to be here forever. Our stuff is not going to last forever. Our net worth is not going to be around. The cars that I drive are going to rust and rot. Right? The job that I have is not going to be there when I'm 80 or 90 or I see Jesus face to face. This thing is all going away. So what that means is that what we have right now is we have a window. We have a window of opportunity to say thank you to Jesus and to help lots of other people be impacted and to hear about and to know about the love and the story and the hope of Jesus. That's what we have to work with. And God would look at us and say, guys, I've given you this, and this is gold. And he would look at each of us and say, I've put gold into you. I've given you all kinds of unique, individually crafted gold for you to take and to have the joy and the privilege of working with it and risking with it and doing something with it to multiply that out. It's to this person, nobody gets in trouble here for taking a risk. Nobody gets in trouble here for trying. The only person who kind of gets in big trouble is the one who looks and says, I'm gonna cower and I'm gonna shrink down and I'm gonna act in fear. I'm gonna live here. I'm gonna dig a hole and I'm gonna take all that you've given me and I'm just gonna put it in the ground and wait. And then when the master comes back, he in essence is gonna look and say, what are you doing? I didn't give you this for you to just sit on it. I could have just sat on it. I wanted you to run with it. I wanted you to be able to share in my happiness, the verse says. He's like, I wanted you to win. I wanted you to have the joy of giving yourself away. You're not supposed to just keep your life and your investment and what you're entrusted with. You're supposed to give it away. Right? It's a big takeaway I want us to make sure we get today. Right? We aren't entrusted with life to try to keep it. We're entrusted with it to give it away. We're entrusted with what we have and the time we have to spend it because we can't keep it. It's not keepable. The Bible's going to say that everything in this earth, all the physical stuff, it's all going to go away one day. There's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, right? Everything is going to be destroyed. So I'm not going to invest myself and put my heart into stuff that's going to be destroyed one day. I'm going to use the stuff that I have to try to kind of go for it, right? I'm going to use what God has entrusted to me to try to make an impact for him, so that one day he can look at you and me and say, well done, good and faithful servant, come share in my happiness. That's the idea. This one right here, what's crazy is this actually, for most of us, at least probably for me too, this feels like the way God would tend to see us. Don't mess it up. Don't lose it. Don't take any real risks. Just stay where you are, and you won't make mistakes. Some of us grew up in homes that sounded like that. Hey, all you got to do is just like not mess your life up. Don't make a mistake, and if you do, maybe you're scrutinized for it. Here's what Jesus would say. He'd say, whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for me will find it. The reality of being an entrusted person is we're entrusted not to hoard, we're entrusted to multiply and to give. And when I start to get my lifetime and my time here on the earth in that frame, I'm starting to see life for what it actually is. And what's wild is this is actually where joy and purpose and peace starts to show up. Because when I try to live just for myself, there's a shallowness that enters in. Because if I'm just living for me, I'm trying to spend my 5 or my 2 on my 1, all on me, then I'm going to find that runs out. When I give it away, I find a joy that I'm actually created to experience because I'm watching other people come alive, right? It's the idea. Right? Say it this way, God's heart for his children doesn't sound like don't mess it up. It sounds like go for it. Did you know that today, when God looks at you and me, here's what he's looking for. He's looking at you, and he's saying, what I want for you is I want you to grab hold of the life that I died to give you. I want your days to be so filled with purpose that it stretches you out of your comfort zone, and it sometimes terrifies you in fear. Say, Ryan, how do you know that? How do I know that the 2 and the 5, how do I know that they actually experience fear? All you have to do is look at the Bible, and everybody that followed God ran into this as they chased faith. David, Paul, Jesus would even say, I despaired of life, right? He was so, right, as he went to the cross, there was a terror in there. And guys, here's the thing. All of us are going to face this. If I'm going to look at my lifetime, and I'm going to say, I want to multiply this for the things of the kingdom. If I'm going to go for it, for the sake of God's glory, I'm going to sound something like this. At least this is how it works for me. As I start to get moving and start to begin to think about taking a risk, I'm going to start to have to face things like this. Well, God, you know how messed up I am. You know what I did. Who am I to go try to make an impact on the world? People are going to judge me, and they're going to think that I'm trying to make myself a big deal. Well, once I get into something, I start to do something for a while, I take a step of faith, I'm going to bump into doubts. I'm going to start to wonder, am I on the right path? Is this thing actually going to pay off, or am I just kind of wasting my life doing this version of investing in myself? I could be doing a whole bunch of things that are way easier. It looks like other people are doing things that are easier. And those fears and doubts start to wander in. When you're on a long path of obedience, this thing probably took some time, right? When you're raising children for Jesus, when you have a long when you have a marriage that you're investing in over time, when you're trying to give yourself to a path, there's going to come a time where you start to wonder, is this doing anything at all? Does my life actually count for anything at all? Because I was a pastor for 5 years, and I asked myself that question. Am I doing anything at all? And people looked at me like, are you insane? You're doing stuff all the time. But the fear kicked in, right? And I started to lose sight of it. And when fear starts to show up, it starts to cripple us, and it shrinks our vision. And we're going to, on our way to being faithful, we're going to wonder, is my life doing anything? Right? Every follower of Jesus is going to face these kinds of scenarios. And we have to decide, am I going to be the one that came close to moving into fear and persevered through it? Or am I going to be the guy that just went and hit it in the ground? I caved in. I had enough. It was scary. I didn't want to get hurt again. I'm just going to take my stuff and I'm just going to keep it and play it safe. Right? The entrusted person, this is just wild that God set it up this way. That God, when he looks at us, I think we tend to approach God this way. That what God's mostly worried about is me not making any moral mistakes ever and coming to church a lot and waiting to go to heaven. Those things are important. And there's an entire picture like this where God is saying, I'm trying to stretch and grow you in ways that as you become more and more following after me, multiplying what I've given, entering into the joy of giving yourself away, you come to life on this journey. I was thinking about it. My kids, I've got 4 kids, 12 to 18. You know what I say to my kids all the time? You got to get out of your comfort zone. Do something that scares you. And you know what I thought? Ryan, when's the last time you did something that scares you? When's the last time you got outside of your comfort zone? When's the last time you ripped the Band-Aid? When's the last time you walked across the room? I was like, oh, snap. I should probably do some of that too. And here's the reality. The person who is captivated by this pursuit is going to be a person that is perpetually alive. Hear what that means. That does not mean pain-free. That does not mean difficulty-free. That does not mean that now all the circumstances in your life are going to be great, right? That's not the way it works. What it does mean is you have a purpose that is eternal, that will not fade, and even when you doubt it, you can come back and renew it, and you're with a whole bunch of people that are trying to do the same thing. And you say, Ryan, put some skin on it for us. Like, what does this look like? I think we got to ask this kind of question, right? Something like this. How can I use what God has given to me to bring honor and to glory to him? All right, how can right, if each of us ask that question, what's the gold? What has God given me? What's God put in me? And we said, God, how can I use what I got for you? We might ask a question like this. I wrote a bunch of them down. We might ask a question like this. What am I aiming at in direction for the next 5 years of how I can spend my life for the glory of God? Not just have what I want in life. Aim it for the glory of God. To say thank you back to Jesus for what he's done for me. Say, Ryan, what could that look like? I wrote down some examples of people that I've seen doing versions of this. And by the way, there's no perfect version, right? There's just this line, a line of trying to and I made it nice and straight. It's probably very squiggly like this in reality. It's up and down in fear and sometimes wanting to quit and sometimes being all in. And right, that's the version of reality. But here, it might sound like this. I know people who use their career to aim at glory and honor for God. I know accountants that do that. I know tow truck drivers that do that. They wake up every day and ask the question, Lord, whose vehicle do I get to tow today that I might share Christ with somebody? I know plumbers that do. I just met a guy that said, my plumber invited me to church today, and you talked about plumbers. And I was like, I don't know how to explain that. That's ridiculous. That's God connecting the dots. I know stay-at-home moms that look and say, I'm going to raise my baby, my child, just like we just talked about. I'm going to invest my life into this child, praying and hoping that they know Jesus and make him known. I know people that live far below their means so that they can give like crazy and enter into the joy of giving themselves away. I know people that purposefully embrace singleness for the sake of having a focused pursuit on a life of Jesus and serving his people. I know people that have said, hey, I want to make my house the place where teenagers land. So my teenagers can bring their friends, and we're going to spend way too much money on pop and pizza and make this the place that makes Jesus make sense, because when you come over here, it feels good. And what you can't quite put a finger on when that kid shows up is that kid is feeling and experiencing the community of God. I know people that would look and say, we're going to put more energy and effort into raising our children, and we're going to do that in a school system. We're going to anchor ourselves deeply into a public school system so that we might be a light in a place where there's not always a ton of light. We're going to homeschool our kids. We're going to raise our kids in Christian school. They do it on purpose in these different arenas, and they're all good. I know people that would say, I'm going to venture out and take a risk and start a business, or I'm going to be a part of the next campus, the first campus that Akron East launches, which is going to happen one day, God willing, right? You can be excited about that, right? There's people that literally just are unbelievable at exercising faith in the midst of fear, of just staying the course and persevering in relationships for the sake of Jesus. See, here's what I want us to see. There's all kinds of ways that we can take our 2 or our 5 and make it 4 or 10. That might mean looking at our scenario and having that show up and saying, I'm going to start doing something that I think God's calling me to do at church. That's a reality. That's part of it. So some of you might be gifted musically and you've just been chilling and we didn't know it. And we're like, hey, raise your hand. Right? Some of you might have a passion for kids and we're like, let us know. That's awesome. Others of us, most of our effort and energy might happen out in the world, in a school, in a workplace, in a neighborhood, in a family room. And here's what I want you to know. The gold is multiplied, not just during services or at church activities, although that definitely is part of it. It happens all throughout, all the day, all the time. And this is why it's so critical for us to see that the life that is abundant does not start when we die and go to heaven. It starts today. It starts when I say yes to Jesus, and it gets me out of bed in the morning. See, Jesus is saying, I want to seek and save the lost. I want to bring hope to a dying world, and I want to do it through you. And I want you to feel the joy that comes when you live like that. Join me in the mission. Share in my happiness. So that when the end comes, you look and say, I didn't burn my life. I didn't waste it. I wasn't lulled to sleep with the pleasures of life and just check out. Oh, and by the way, it doesn't matter what age you are to do this. The Bible's filled with stories of teenagers that changed the world, grabbing a hold of the gold that God has given them. The Bible is full of aged people, by the way, as well. Right? If you're sitting here today and you think, my time is past, I'm about done, if you're drawing breath, there's something to do, right? There's a way to be used. If you think for 1 second, I can't be used by God because I have sinned too much, hear me. That's what the cross is all about. He's paid for all of it. He's paid for all of it. Does that mean you might have to confess and you might have to own it, but realize that you got to get after that so that you can get on to this. You can be awakened to your purpose so that you don't just end up hiding it in the ground, living in fear and smallness. God would look at you and I and ask the question, how are you going to take your life and spend it for me? Not to earn anything, but as a thank you. Here's probably the question that we have to wrestle with. The question is, where am I headed? Am I headed towards fear? Am I headed towards the glory and honor of God? And if we had one takeaway, that this might be the one that I want you to land with. In my experience, there's almost always something that God is asking me to do that sounds like me moving into fear. Almost always. Almost always. Whether that's reconciling a broken relationship, whether that's flushing a habit that is tearing me away from all of this, whether that's making a decision that says we're not going to live like this anymore, we have to make some changes. Right? What's the decision right now that's causing you to stall, that's tempting you to cower? What's the thing that if you did that, it'd make you really nervous, but you'd feel amazing once it's done? Right? Guys, it could show up anywhere. Here's the thing. Here's what I want for you and for me. Why this is such a big deal is I find myself getting stuck sometimes in the fear, and I don't want to stall out. I don't want you to stall out. So we have to come back to this and ask these questions so that we can look and say, God, what is it? What do you want me to do right now? Will you give me the courage to move forward in it and rip the Band-Aid and come out of the comfort zone and do the thing? Maybe it's walking across the room and engaging someone. Maybe it's giving something financially for the sake of God's kingdom. It doesn't have to be here, by the way. Right? But look and say, God says, test me in this, right? Give financially to the things of my kingdom. Maybe it's sharing your faith. Maybe it's looking and saying, I'm sorry to somebody that you failed. Maybe it's saying, I'm going to completely see this part of my life differently. What is it? What is the out of the comfort zone step that God is calling you into that if you took it, you'd feel like you're coming to life? That as you think about it, fear swells. If I did that, then what would people think? What will they do if I make that decision? If I stop sleeping with my girlfriend or boyfriend, what's going to happen? If I take that leap, everybody's going to judge me. So what? So what? They might. Who are you going at the end of the day, who are you going to look at and whose voice are you going to hear? Not theirs. There's one king, and there's one person's happiness that we're being invited into. I'm not saying we should disregard people. We love people. We serve. Right? And at the end of the day, they are not our master. They are not our master. Your boss isn't your master. Your spouse isn't your master. Your kids aren't your master. Your mom's not your master. There is one master, one person at the end of the day that we will answer to, and that is Christ the King. What's the step? And here's the thing, Ryan, you sit here and say, Ryan, I'm fired up right now, man. I feel it. You got to do something, okay? You can't just feel fired up. We got to do something with it. We got to press it into action. It's the only way we get from here to there. And as we take those steps, I just want you to know, the God of the universe, as he watches you square off with your fears, I want you to know he's cheering. Like the healthiest parent you've ever seen, who's beaming in pride as he watches you move out in here. We're not earning, it's paid for, but the Father looks at you and I and says, that's what I'm looking for. Share in my happiness. As I wrestle with this one, that's why I keep coming back to it over and over. As I feel the pull and the draw of fear, the temptations of distraction, and I need called over and over and over again to this line, to avoid this line at all costs. So the band comes out. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes, and would you wrestle this through and find a step that the Lord's asking you to take? Father, I say thank you that you are a God who is the perfect Father. Lord, you're not looking at us saying, don't mess it up. We already messed it up. That's why you sent Jesus. We destroyed it. And you look at us and say, I paid for that. And you call us to go for it, Lord, with you, to enter into what you want, which is to bring hope and love and light to this world. God, and you give us the freedom to do that within our passions, within giftings that we have, within things that sometimes make us feel alive. And Lord, even when it's scary, when it causes fear, Lord, you're right in the fear with us. So would you help us, Lord? Help us to be empowered to move towards your best for our days as we say thank you back to you. Meet us here, Lord, even now.